Welcome back to this week's episode. On today's podcast, I welcome back returning guest Mike Mandel, as well as artist Chantal Zakari. Mike and Chantal just released a new book titled Accidental Evidence. It's a collection of the make-ready sheets and misprints that they discovered while they were out in Istanbul printing a new edition of Mike's well-known book, Evidence, that he created with longtime creative partner Larry Sultan in the 1970s. So the new book is just a really interesting approach and this kind of a new iteration of some of the photographs that have been in the longtime popular book Evidence. So this interview has kind of talked to them about their creative collaboration together, printing books, and just kind of how they approach editing this new book and much more. I'm a big fan of Mike's work and Chantal as well. So I was excited to get him on the podcast. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. And before we get into today's episode, just have to give a big thank you to our sponsor, PicDrop.
PicDrop is a file transfer tool that was actually founded by working photographers with photographers in mind. You can easily drag and drop your photos into custom galleries and send them securely to your clients via links, and you can track everything in one spot and see who's interacting and making notes on your photos. I've been using it for 5 years now, and the thing I like about it, this kind of streamlines my workflow, and I can communicate with my clients all in one spot and track everything. And another cool thing about PicDrop is they're never going to use your photos for AI training, which a lot of these other companies are doing these days, because they are working photographers themselves and understand what it's like to have their photos stolen. So they would never do that without your permission. And with today's episode, if you use the promo code BANTER, you'll get 2 months free of the PicDrop image transfer tool. So definitely go give it a try. All you got to do is go over to PicDrop.com, enter the promo code BANTER, and just let me know what you guys think.
Well, Mike and Chantal, thanks for taking the time to do this. Really excited to talk to you guys about your new book, Accidental Evidence. But I guess let's start off. I was kind of curious, like, when did you guys start collaborating together on creative projects?
Well, Chantal and I met when we both were teaching at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and that was back in the early 70s, 1973, I believe. Chantal, maybe you know better than I.
No, not 73.
What did I say?
93.
1993. It's not 1973.
I was a baby in 73.
Yeah, it's all kind of becoming a blur to me. But no, yes, I can distinguish between 1993 and 73. But we met in Chicago, and we started talking about projects that we might want to collaborate on. Chantal was a graphic artist. I was a photographer, and she began to describe to me the imagery of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk in Turkey, because Chantal grew up in Turkey, and all of the sculptures and all of the posters and images of the revolutionary hero of the Turkish Revolution from the 1920s were very, very accessible. They're very predominating in the Turkish landscape. And that was kind of an exciting notion. I think my education about the history of the Ottoman Empire was extremely limited. Somehow we missed that in my Western education. So also we realized that as she described this influence of this imagery of this one man, this kind of cult of personality that was developed around Ataturk, was that that was all going to be up for grabs in the future with the rise of political Islam that was coming to all parts of the Middle East. And that so that became we thought that would be an interesting subject for us, because it was an imagery that was going to be in sort of in crisis or contention, I guess.
And it combined elements of street photography, of archival research, interviews. You know, we were thinking of a book, so it included design of the book. We ended up publishing a little comic book within the book. So it had a lot of elements to it that sustained us and sustained our interest for 10 years. We continued working on it for a very long time, because we would go back to Turkey, we would make a list and say, we still need a picture of this, or we need to interview this person. And, you know, we would make a list, we would go to Turkey, and of course we would do half of the things that were on our list, and then some other things would come up. And so, you know, you can never predict how a project turns around. But
Well, within that project too, we got married. We had a child. It took 10 years because of all the things that kind of were happening to us during that period. Um, and there was, I don't know how much we want to talk about the stay of Atta, but we came to look at this imagery of Ataturk, and then Chantal, during the course of the project, became kind of a symbol for what Ataturk stood for, a symbol of secularism in this demonstration that we just happened to become part of, where Chantal was holding up a picture of Ataturk to a group of protesters that were protesting the increase of secular education requirements. And that image of her holding up the picture of Ataturk all of a sudden became national news, and her image was broadcast on TV and in all the newspapers. And so that was kind of a crazy thing that happened, is that we came to look at something that was about the symbol of secularism that Ataturk represented. And then Chantal became that symbol herself. So that's why that book was kind of exciting for us and problematic, I guess, at the same time.
And I guess for you, Chantel, prior to like meeting Mike and starting to work together, had you been like a collaborative artist? Because that's the thing I think is really interesting about you guys, is like a lot of like most visual artists that I know, they don't really collaborate. Like musicians do, but visual artists, it's very much a solo practice, I feel like, a lot of the time. And Mike, you've had a couple. Obviously, you collaborate with Chantal now, and then obviously famously with Larry. But for you, Chantal, how is it getting to collaborate with another creative partner on projects, I guess?
yeah, we didn't teach collaboration in schools. So it's not like this is embedded in the curriculum and students are in tune to collaborate. We have a couple of musician friends, and we see that they get together, they play, they collaborate, they make music.
Collaboration is everything in music, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't think we teach that in schools, which is a shame. But no, so I graduated in 92 and I met Mike in 93. So I had done some work, but not a lot, and certainly not collaboratively with other people, other than, being in group critiques and talking about other people's work, but not actively collaborating. And what was nice with Mike was that, he had different skills than I do, and I had different skills. And so we were kind of completing each other's missing skills. So that was also an easy way to get together. But then, once we became a couple and we started, doing work as husband and wife, then something nice happens. Or, some people like to separate work and family life. For us, it was all intertwined. We would be at the beach and our daughter would be, playing with the sand, and we would be discussing a part of our project, or so it completes each other. Life becomes a whole rather than two separate elements.
Yeah,
Collaboration is nice on that end.
and I guess how
Well, beyond that, let me add a little thought about what's great about collaborating is that you get to test your ideas out, and you can have a disagreement, and you have to defend the idea that you think is the right way to go. So it's kind of built in that you get where you're going a lot faster when you can test out, what you're doing together, and really have to argue it out and figure it out. It's sort of the Socratic method.
Yeah, because now, like back when you think back, Mike, when you were working with Larry on the first evidence book, like, were you? I know we talked about it a little bit in the first interview I did with you, but were you like excited about the collaboration from the jump, or was it something you were kind of hesitant to like collaborate with another artist, or like what do you remember about like this kind of that first collaborative thing with another artist, I guess?
Well, I guess what I remember was that we were in San Francisco, and Larry and I were both we had both grown up in L.A., and we had kind of bonded from that perspective, where we didn't have the same kind of sense of history, and I guess we were kind of reacting to the pretentiousness of the cultural landscape of San Francisco, sort of the beat generation's coffee house aesthetic, which we just was part of our LA mentality. And so I think we connected really strongly, and we wanted to work together. We noticed that we were both taking pictures of in and around billboards, and so we thought, well, we could do so. We did a billboard what we probably would not have done on our own. To do something that was like a huge 10-foot by 22-foot image was maybe a little bit, hard to think that one of us would have just kind of taken that on. But there's two people together, you can do anything.
That's right.
So that's the way we felt. Yeah. And so, Larry was a very different kind of personality than I was. He's much more, he could speak off the top of his head and be extremely articulate. Where for me, I was doing much more writing, and I kind of come at ideas as more, with that kind of focus. And we balanced each other out really nicely. And I think, I think a lot of people are collaborating these days, much more so than when we were starting to work together in the 70s. And I think it's a great way to go. You think, artists are inherently egoistic.
Yeah.
So to put that in the background a little bit and realize that it's not me, it's us. I think it's a nicer way, a nicer energy.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, because you see it with artists. Like I've had these conversations where people are like, I don't want to be in a group show. I want my own show. It's all about like the solo thing. But I like being a part of the community, and the collaborating is awesome. Like you said, like a lot of times you can do more when you're collaborating with another person. But I guess for you guys, how does the process of like collaborating together work? Like, do you generally agree on most creative decisions, or do you kind of butt heads sometimes, like in putting this book together? Like, how does that work? Because everyone has their own ideas, taste, and approach, I guess.
Go for it, Chantal.
Yeah, let it rip, Chantal.
Well, it is complicated when, you're married and you're collaborating. Because you could be also disagreeing about what to have for dinner or who's going to cook dinner. So it all overlaps, right? But I think generally conceptual ideas, we're on the same wavelength. And sometimes we might disagree on how to do something. But like Mike said, you have to justify why you think your idea is a good idea, and it forces you to be more articulate. It forces you to really consider it from different perspectives. So, even if there is tension, then you can sleep over it and come back to it and see what the advantages are. You have to have a really good reason to convince the other person, and we're both pretty strong-headed. So, I don't think it's easy for either one of us to let go of an idea if we believe it's a good idea. Some projects are easier than other projects, I think. And like Mike talked about working in Turkey, the advantage there also was that he was the outsider and I was the insider to the culture. So I think there might be disagreements there on how we think we should approach something. And, I would trust his sense of wanting to do something different that is perhaps not, appropriate for the Turkish culture, but it's taking a risk. Whereas, understanding the culture, I may be more cautious and more trying to fit into the culture. And, that gets us further in some cases. And so there are advantages and disadvantages of both ideas that we need to play off of each other.
Well, that remember that line drawing of Ataturk's face. That's very, very simple, and every Turk would recognize this kind of angle of the face, and that it's an iconic image in Turkish culture. And I looked at it and I thought it was I didn't know what it was. I couldn't even make it out. You had the knowledge to be able to do that. But like for the project we just did, the reason it even happened was because that we were collaborating. I was busy looking at the evidence sheets that were coming off the press, and I was making sure that the ink levels were where I thought they should be, and that everything was registered properly. And I was just focused only on that. But you were doing something else, and that's why accidental evidence happened, right? You you were kind of walking around the printing uh, floor and recognizing that here were these make-ready sheets that were, being collected that had collages of evidence images on top of each other, which I probably wouldn't have even noticed had you not brought them to my attention.
Right. And we were on press. You were really focused on evidence. That was your project. That was you were there to make sure that this edition of evidence would print as well as it could. And a printing is a very planned production. It involves a lot of people. Everybody's looking at this sheet of paper, and so I had the luxury to walk around the press and make snapshots with my iPhone, and I could recognize what other things were happening surrounding this event.
Yeah, because you were in Istanbul printing. It was the fifth printing of evidence, correct? When you guys were working on this?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Chantal, what do you remember about being in the I guess the printing facility? Was it like as soon as you saw that the make ready sheets, you were this kind of like a light bulb went off for you, or like what do you remember about seeing?
No light bulbs. No, just really photographing and thinking that this is interesting. Well, first of all, I was photographing Mike looking at evidence, the sheets coming out of the press. It's a really exciting moment. It's really magical because you work on this document for months on the computer. You tweak Photoshop files, then you come into InDesign and, you plan everything, or you think you have everything under control, and then it all goes on press. And, it's hard to predict sometimes how the ink is going to translate a piece. And, there's a performative aspect to it where the paper is fed and it comes out of the press, and we're printing it in Istanbul at this press that has a Japanese press. It has a infrared light that instantly dries the ink. It's spectacular. It's fun to watch. The sheet comes out, then Mike looks at it and he's trying to identify if the gray is gray enough or if it should be lighter or darker, if it's even. There's a lot of work that goes into making a print look good. And so I was free. I could walk around and I would look into the trash. I would look into all the make-ready sheets that they were feeding back and forth into the printer. And so it looked like it was really a lot of fun to find these images that were printed on top of each other. They're very rich. They're very black. There's a lot of ink. They're shiny. They just came out of the press, so they're very shiny. But inherently, it's about recognizing the significance of these collages, and I think, I am trained as a designer where you try to control every element of the piece, but it's important to see accidents, and it's important to be able to recognize unpredictable elements that you've never thought of. And I think this was an opportunity like that. I made a quick snapshot and I showed it to Mike. And then we thought, let's collect these. These are really beautiful. And so then we didn't immediately think of making a book, but then, we make books, so that leads into the right direction. But they were really beautiful and interesting images because they're overlapping, these very iconic images from a book that everybody knows.
And for you, Mike, when you saw those first the make ready sheets where it's like the kind of collages that are in the book now, like what was your kind of initial response when you kind of saw them?
Well, I just thought it was a moment of eureka. It was like unbelievably crazy that these pictures, which I've lived with now for 40 some years, I think this is like the 47th year the book has been in print. And they've always been in the right place where they're supposed to be, right next to each other and facing pages. But now there were, pictures on top of each other that were invading each other's space. And it was just kind of a crazy, freeing moment of like, these are wonderful. These are just, it's not something that you would ever want to do, just because there's no reason to do it. If you're doing it at home, you don't want to collage this stuff. It's not what it's about. The book was really about these documentary photographs that these agencies were making to record their experiments in technology and, trying to come up with solutions to the world's problems with advanced technology. And we were looking at how psychologically they were very kind of fearful images, scary images. So in the book, they do what they're supposed to do in these facing page relations, and there's a sequence to the book, and it's a very controlled artwork. It's got a beginning, it's got an end. There's all kinds of things happen. But here now, outside of our control, were these crazy collisions, and when in the book, there's a image of the room where there's like a big, looks like a computer server, maybe an early server from the 1960s, and there's all these wires that are coming out of it, laying on a table, and then there's like a bulletin board that looks like it's black that's in the background, and it's like that has its place in evidence in a particular location. Well, there's 5 of them in a row in this book, in Accidental Evidence, and they relate to each other. All of a sudden, this room is now relating to 5 different photographs that, there's an opportunity to think about it differently because of these 5 pictures that it's relating to. So once we saw things like that were happening, and they just seemed so crazy and fun, we decided, okay, now we have another project. We've got to collect all these things. And we asked the printer if we could have a space to work in, so we could take all these press sheets and cut out the ones that we thought were interesting. So we couldn't carry everything home with us. It would have taken a shipment that was going to be very heavy to take all the press sheets. The press sheets are really big. You've got 12 images front and back on a press sheet. So we had to cut them out, and but there were a couple hundred of pages that we ended up bringing back with us that we thought were really pretty nice.
Oh, that's amazing. And I guess for people listening, if you could explain, like, what is a make-ready sheet?
Yes. Well, the press is, it's not designed to be, it's not like when you're at home and you're making a print off your computer and you push the button and print and it comes out just the way you thought it was going to be. These machines require calibration. So when you start the press, the ink levels are not where they're supposed to be. The press has to run quite a number of times, and maybe 20, 30 sheets of paper are going to go through the press before the ink is where it's supposed to be. And, the printers don't want to just throw the stuff out because, that's a lot of paper that gets wasted on every press run they do. There's, a stack of sheets that's no good. So what they do is they just make a stack of these make-readies. They make the printer, they make the printer ready, really. And then they just use them over and over again. There's like a place in that floor, on the floor, where there's just like a pile of make-readies that are just totally black. They've been used so many times that they're just totally black with ink, and they're just waiting to be trashed. But between that, there's just a palette where they just collect all the make-readies on the piece of the sheet that they're working on, and then we could look at those and all of a sudden say, well, let's just take these 3. And then Chantal became kind of friendly with the person who was the assistant to the printer, who was choosing which pieces of paper to enter the press for the make-readies. And, she kind of alerted him to make sure there were more different evidence pictures that we're going to go through, just to kind of help us along.
Oh, wow. So you're kind of directing it while you're there. Like, hey, use this one kind of and then print on that a little bit.
Not really,
Okay.
but we did recognize that this was happening. If I don't know if you have a picture of the title page of the book, but the title page of the book includes also the names of all the pressmen and their assistant. There it is.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask, so all these names here are the people that printed it.
Right.
Okay.
And they're the ones who randomly are making these decisions. So we're kind of grateful for their energy and effort in making these combinations. And they're the ones running the press, especially the assistant who's feeding these make-readies into the machine. But we had another moment that was really wonderful, was before evidence was printed, Faraz Ravi, who is a UK-based photographer, his book Seasons of the Fallen was being printed, And his book, I'll talk about it from a design standpoint at least, is a bigger and wider book. And it was using the sheet sideways, whereas ours was using the sheet vertically. And which meant that his pictures were really falling right between the evidence pictures. So yeah, I think you had another sheet with Faraz's images. And his images, there it is. His images are nice and warm.
Yeah.
And so they fill in these gaps between the evidence images. And it was just like a perfect panoramic photograph that was created through the juxtaposition of these really warm and cool images. Plus, the subject matter is so much different.
And what was that conversation like when you had to reach out to them, to obviously get their permission to use their work in your book? Like, were they like up for it right away, or what was that conversation like?
Yeah, we had made some snapshots of some of the make-readies of that we liked that uses Faraz's imagery, and we sent them to him. And thankfully, he was really open. He was just kind of he thought it was really funny, and he thought it would be really interesting to make it happen. So he was very open and willing to collaborate with us, and willing to, and gave us the freedom to basically do whatever we wanted. He didn't, say, do this or that, or don't use a picture sideways, but oftentimes there are pictures that we used where his picture is actually correctly viewed and the evidence photograph is sideways. And they're and the way his photographs are very poetic, moody pictures of the landscape, the kind of the foggy British landscape that's full of thoughtfulness about that. And the landscape images that are in evidence are not that. They're more like just sets or backgrounds, just backgrounds for these experiments that are happening in the landscape. There's people sitting in hospital beds that are out in the park, or there's strange geometry that's happening that we don't understand. That's weird triangular shapes that are posts stuck in the ground in evidence, and there are all these weird scientific study backdrops. So the collision between his kind of moody poetry and our, well, here actually the one you have just right now is really quite nice. If you want to go back, so his image of the tree is actually, when you look at it in the book, the tree is straight up and down, and the nuclear power plant, which is the evidence photograph, is sideways. Here we look at it, incorrectly, but so I guess that's a really strong contrast there, which is, we're just looking at the way science has impacted the landscape and how it's turned it into just an experimental ground for human, opportunities to develop technology, whereas he was looking at it more as a space to reflect in. So it was a really perfect collision of imagery, and the book is so much better for it.
I think what's also nice about Faraz's image is that there are no people, and so all the people are in evidence, and they're the ones that are manipulating and changing and transforming things. And so that duality worked out really well. In terms of printing, it worked out really well because then we didn't have to color print anything. It was a lot. Actually, the printing of this book was pretty challenging because we wanted to have the richness of the ink that a make ready has. And if you print everything with one black, it won't look as rich. So we were printing a black and a gray for the evidence pictures, and then a black and a warm gray for Faraz's pictures. So we really had two blacks in the book, and the overlapping of the two blacks created this really glossy, rich printing in the book.
And is there any, obviously, because the photos and accidental evidence are from the original evidence, are you trying to match the tones in the original book, or do you just view it as a new thing and you're not so much concerned about matching it, I guess?
No, we started matching it because we wanted the grays to be the same. But we also knew that these were accidents, so they're not perfect prints. And so some of them are too dark or too light. Like Mike explained, it takes a while for the press to get the right density going, right? And so one of the first images in the book is way too light. So that's not how it's printed in evidence, but we wanted to maintain that irregularity and the imperfection. It's really a book about imperfection being interesting and accidental and full of meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about the mistakes. Um, the other thing that's for me, I think, is significant is that this book, if this would have been a book that we made of make-readies about something else that was not just not a well-recognized photographic book, evidence has been around for a long time. People know it, and they know what the pictures are. There was an Instagram post by the artist and teacher David Campani, right? He had posted. This is before we did the project. There was a evidence photograph of people who were working on an agricultural project, and they were working on these peach trees that were inside a plastic tent. And he found a picture that was like an outtake from that shoot. It was just almost exactly the same photo, but the people were slightly in different positions. So he just had recognized it, and the fact that he found it in some kind of I don't know where it was, a yard sale or some shop, posted it saying, another alternative to an iconic evidence photograph. And I guess I never really thought of evidence being iconic, but it has had a strong life. It's been around, as I said, for more than 50 years, or almost 50 years. I mean,
Yeah.
So because of that, the make-readies that we have now are much more charged because they're images people know. They can recognize them, even if they're kind of too dark and there's 3 layers of them. they can make them out. There's a really nice picture in there of the guy in the tunnel. This guy who's kind of in the LA water department, and there's like a big tunnel that he's standing inside, and he just becomes disappeared by the photograph that's printed over him. That's a big grid, and his body becomes kind of big squares, and he just disappears. And the same photograph of the guy in the tunnel, at the last photograph in the book, he also disappears into the texture of this exploded corner, which is really quite beautiful. Just the texture of the concrete that's exploded, and how that interferes with the tunnel texture that he's in. So, all of these things are really kind of cool just in and of themselves, but they wouldn't be that important had they not be evidence photographs to begin with, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Again, the other thing I was curious about, being that you created evidence with Larry Sultan, who's no longer with us. I guess going into this book, was there any thought of hesitation because Larry's not here to put input because it's based off a project you guys worked on together? How do you kind of think about that aspect
Yeah.
there?
Well, I've thought about this. Obviously, you think about this when you do something that's going to be an extension of a project that was our private project. Larry and I, we used to do these billboards, these non-commercial art pieces that were on billboards. And every time we did a billboard, we would make a photograph of it, and then we would have a color postcard made out of it. And we make, maybe 1,000 of those. We would send them out all over, to people all over the country that we knew. And they were just a way to, expand our audience of our public artwork. And when we were in the postcard company's print shop, it was a big place. It was Mike Roberts Color Productions in Berkeley. It's a really big printer. And they were printing stuff from tourist landscapes to restaurants and motels, and just all kinds of stuff from California and the western part of the states. And we would walk through it, and there would just be all these make-readies that were lying on the floor. It would be just a total junk area where they weren't as prim and proper as they could be with their how they were keeping their paper. It was just all over the place. And Larry and I thought, well, let's collect this stuff, all these make-readies, and we could just make books out of them. And we could just not do anything. We just cut them up and make books out of them. but we didn't ever do it. It was just something that was like an aside, and we just were on to different things. So I guess the reason I tell you that story is because he and I have already had this conversation. we we thought the Make Ready was a really beautiful opportunity to show something that was chaotic and unexpected and playful. And I'm sure Larry, I wouldn't be involved in doing this if I didn't think Larry would have been appreciative, and if he and I would have loved to have done it had he lived long enough, I'm sure.
No, I think it's cool because it's just like, I mean, the original project was birthed from being collaborative, like we were talking about. So it's just kind of like, it's cool to see. I was talking to my friend about it, who's a big fan of Evidence, and he was like, he thought it was great because it's just like, oh, it's this new iteration, and it this kind of the collaboration keeps going. And I guess I would ask the same question to you, Chantal. Like, how is your kind of mindset going into this project, that being that it was already based off this like famous book that people know, and like, what was kind of your thoughts going into this?
Yeah, it's a different kind of collaboration because, Evidence was a pretty complex project. They went to archives, they researched, there was a lot of editing that came about. Here, I think we were more focused on the sequence of the book. We found these things, they've already been created, somebody else created them for us, and it was a matter of putting them in an order, and so it's about having a dialogue with the old book because this book starts with the last image of the old book. And so it's almost like picking up where that book left, except it also deconstructs that book, right? So, for example, the essays and the list of agencies now is all mixed up with the images. Um, we created panoramic images. So there's a gatefold. So it's more than just the old book. It becomes now literally the images that are on press as press sheets now become part of the book as the gatefold is. So it's more about the process, but it's always in dialogue with the old book.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
it's also it's kind of an opportunity to be transgressive.
Hmm.
So here's a book that people have appreciated for a long period of time, and the opportunity arose here to mix it all up, to kind of break it up, and to print pictures on top of each other just by chance. Evidence was sort of made out of chance in that Larry and I, we looked through 2 million photographs to get the 59 pictures that Evidence became. So it's kind of like all those pictures are like needles in a haystack. And it took us a long time to find them. But this idea of being transgressive, which is to take your work and to just, destroy it, but not destroy it in a negative way, but to turn it into something else that's somewhat out of your control and also a little bit in your control. It's very, I don't know, I just really enjoyed that. I just felt that was a uplifting way of dealing with the project, which I've lived with for so long now, and just turn it into this kind of crazy, shake it up, I Ching opportunity to see what shakes out. It was pretty nice.
No, I love it. And what was the thought? I like it that it's a soft cover, and it almost, because what was the thought behind that? Because it almost like adds to like the Make Ready feel of it. I would think that's good, the way I think about it. Like when you see the paper just kind of sitting there. What was your guys' decision to go that route?
Yeah, and that was mostly Mike's idea. We wanted to, or he wanted to make it bigger than Evidence so that we could include the crop marks
Mm-hmm.
and all the press marks. And, granted, those are added later on because they're not the original ones. But, it had to be a bigger book to include all the side elements and the junk that is created through the design and the press. But the most fun part, actually, of this book was the sequencing. So once we figured that an image was printed on top of several other images um, in different ways, then we had a constant that we could build on. For example, there is the man on top of the hill that appears right on the chest of the man that has been taken away by the police. And then, the next sequence is, again, the man being held down by the police and the image of the fence. And then it comes to the image that's on the cover, which is the man in his underwear that is being connected with all the cables. And you see again the image of the police in the handcuffs. So you see the same image 3 times, 4 times, and it becomes almost like an animation. It keeps transforming itself, and now you see this image in different contexts that transforms the meaning of the image. So by the time you come to the image of the man in his underwear with cables, he looks even more vulnerable because now he's within the context of the police and the handcuffs. We were interested in this sequencing and creating more opportunities to transform the same image over and over again.
And how long does that process take of sequencing? And do you guys do it? Are you printing out prints and doing it physically? Or are you just doing it digitally? Or like, what's that process like look like?
Well, we had the make-readies, which we brought, they're not that big, because you cut them up off the press sheet. So they're ending up to be about, 11 by 11 or something like that. And we just commandeered a large studio at the school where we teach and just laid them all out and just started, kind of like how Larry and I did evidence really is lay out a whole lot of photographs and then just start to make connections between them and, put them on the wall, pin them up, and start to see how that's the fun part is just to see how you can make one relate to the next and what should come after that. And you keep working on it that way. It's, that's the work really is creating this sequence from beginning to end. And as Chantal was mentioning, what's really cool about this project is that you've got an image which then appears 3 or 4 times in a row with other images on top, and then that kind of segues into one of those images that it could have been the painted airplane that is connected with the earlier picture. Then there's 2 or 3 of those that happen with something else on the top, and it leads to the next one that's part of that group of overlays. And so there's this unwinding of images. There's kind of like some of the stars of the show. There's a few pictures that kind of reappear more often than others. I think Chantal mentioned the chokehold of the police is one of those, and the room I mentioned earlier, the room with the electronic cables and the bulletin board, and then there's the glowing orb of the airplane that is throughout many times, and the man holding the plastic horseshoe. And then of course there's all these iterations of it over evidence photographs, over Faraz's photographs. So it's a very complicated way to think about how these pictures relate to each other. And it was a lot of fun to figure that out. And even using, in the book, there are these blue pages, right? Because in evidence, in the back of the book, there's an essay by Sandra Phillips, which is a sort of a contextualizing history of Larry and my work. That's all the, kind of a backdrop. That wasn't in the earlier editions. In 2003, that's when that essay showed up. So there's a different color background instead of a white background. It's a blue background. And here the images are now on on those blue pages with the text. And, one of them has a picture of oranges on fire, which is one of the billboards Larry and I did. And then now that's paired or collided with an explosion that's opening up some California landscape that's some, test of an explosion. And there's one next to that, which is called The History of Evidence, or A History of Evidence, which was Sandra Phillips' title of her essay. And underneath it now is this black night photograph of all these little guys that are holding up these wires that are connected to these aerial balloons that are, I guess, are like weather balloons. But if you look into the deepness of the black of the night, her text is still there. It's a blacker black than the black of the night imagery. And so now you're reading things, or you can kind of gather some of the text if you want to, that's coming through in more hidden ways. So, there's all these kind of cool things that at the beginning of the book, there's text on text, where when Robert Forth had his essay, the first essay in evidence that was there when we originally did it, he talked a lot about how we make meaning out of things, and how sometimes we might come into a movie after it started and not really know exactly what we're looking at, and we have to kind of figure it out. And if we leave before it's over, we have to kind of imagine what it might have been like if we could stay the whole time. And when you're at the first page of evidence, I'll just go back to it. I'm looking the PDF of evidence right now, and the first page. Let's see. After the title pages, he says, filling in between, reading between the lines. That's on the first page of the book. Filling in between, reading between the lines. And all of that's idea that follows, which if you wanted to try to read it with the two texts of the list of agencies and his essay coming through, it's hard to actually get it, but there's little pieces of kind of concrete poetry, I guess you'd call it, of what's literally happening in this book is very complicated things that are coming through. Sometimes you don't even see the evidence photograph unless you really kind of look closely and find it. It's like 3-4 layers down from the pictures that are on top. But I guess what I was saying earlier is some of the evidence photographs are much more involved in this book, and there's a couple evidence pictures didn't even make it because we didn't have make readies of those particular pictures. I'm not sure which ones those are.
Yeah.
They're not there. So that's sort of the way things turned out.
That's cool. And I guess being that you guys have like published a lot of books, do you have any advice for like someone who maybe want to make their first book or first printed project? Like, what would you tell them kind of going into their first like printed book or project, I guess?
Well, I don't know, Chantal, if you have something you immediately want to say, or I can jump in if you want.
I would say, think about why this is a book. Because, the sequencing is important, but also how does it exist as an object? And what's the significance of it being a book? I think, I'm a big fan of artist books because it's a democratic object. So I understand a lot of people want to make their images more accessible and distribute them more easily, cheaper. But also think about the book as in its own self. What is the cover like and how does it exist as a piece of artwork? I very much value, text and image relationship. And so that's an important connection to make in a book. A book is also something that you experience in the privacy of your home. So there is a lot you can see in a book in a longer period of time. So consider all the stuff. It's not just an exhibit that ends up in a book. There's a lot of nuances. And, what excites me in a book is also when I can do things that expands the book, like the gatefold. You open it and suddenly you see a bigger space than those two facing pages. So there's the materiality of the paper itself and the kind of things that the book can do that an exhibition cannot do, or an animation cannot do, or a film cannot do. It has connections to a lot of these different media, but it's its own space. So I think designing the book is an important part. And I know a lot of photographers have discussions with designers to make this happen, but, that's a healthy relationship, but they should also think for themselves, what is it that they want out of this book?
Yeah, that's good advice. I guess to wrap up, like, is there anything you're hoping like people will take away when looking at your new book, Accidental Evidence, and any kind of, I guess, final words now that the project's going to be out in the world, I guess?
Well, I don't know what my that's a good question. What is the final takeaway from this book? It's except for the fact that there's a lot of fun in this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that it's play. Sometimes art takes itself very seriously, or artists take themselves very seriously.
Seriously, yeah. That's why I always love Mike's work, because there's very little comedy in photography, and like like the one series you did where you just like laid in the ground in like random places or whatever, like it's just like fun. I think when people get into art, you start for fun, and then sometimes people lose the plot or whatever,
Yeah, I think art is serious and art is important, but also it's great to be able to play and recognize when things are out of your control. I think that's a really important thing to know, is that sometimes you start a project knowing exactly what you're going to do, but it's good to be open to unpredictable accidents.
Yeah. And how about you, Mike? How do you feel about now the book's done? Are you like happy with it? And like, what are your kind of final thoughts on the book, I guess?
Yeah, it looks great. We're very enthused about how it functions as an object in and of itself. I think, as Chantal was saying, the book is not just a place where you put things. The book is itself the artwork,
Mm-hmm.
and I think every page that's there, is it works for us. We're very excited about it. So I guess just keep your eyes open and try to be as observant every moment that you have in this short lifespan, and take advantage when accidents happen.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we have a term in photography, we call it a happy accident. Whenever there's a double exposure or a development issue that didn't work out, when I'm talking about, analog photography.
Okay.
And those are kind of really special things, these crazy things that happen that we didn't plan on, we didn't expect to have happen. And you just want to be ready to appreciate that. And that's a good lesson, I think, in life in general.
No, that's good. And any plans for like an exhibit with the accidental evidence work or anything like that, you think?
Well, I don't know, but again, we've talked about the book being the artwork, so
Yeah, true. Buy the book.
we'll be a New York Art Fair.
Well, actually, we have a lot of these make-readies that we cut up, and the first 100 books or the 100 sales are going to get a make-ready, an original make-ready.
Oh, wow.
So it's not like we're thinking of a show. On the contrary, we want to distribute these so that people have the original piece in their hands.
And it's people can buy it. Is it available for purchase? It comes out in September. Is it pre-order now, or can people buy it now?
Yeah, it comes out in September. The books will be delivered to our basement this Monday, so they will arrive and people can place orders on our website soon.
Which is
The website is
the corner.net, right?
Yeah, it's thecorner.net. When you go there, you'll see the big full spread of the front cover, the back cover, the spine of evidence, of accidental evidence, and it'll lead you to seeing a bunch of pictures of it. And you can order it, and as Chantal said, we've got these first 100 that we've signed and numbered that are the actual make-readies that. And each one of them is unique, right? Because some of them are darker, some of them are lighter. Because each sheet that went through, it got darker or lighter depending on what they needed to do. So yeah, they're kind of cool that you'll it. Hopefully, will jumpstart the interest in the project.
Yeah,
for people who want to get those.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, Chantal and Mike, really appreciate you taking the time, and excited for people to see the book. So thanks so much.
Well, thanks for having us, Alex. I appreciate your interest in your spirit as well.
Yeah, appreciate it. So there you have it. That was the Mike Mandel and Chantal Zakari interview. Just want to thank Mike and Chantal so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It was a real pleasure talking to them about their new book, Accidental Evidence, which is available for purchase now on their website, thecorner.net. I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to go grab a copy of their new book. Definitely highly recommend it. Really cool book. But as I also mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, with today's episode, if you use the promo code BANTER, you'll get 2 months free of the PicDrop image transfer tool. All you have to do is go over to picdrop.com, enter the promo code BANTER, and you'll get 2 months free. And I'll also put the link in the show notes to that if you want to go check it out. And as always, thanks so much for listening, and take care.